All right, folks, you wanted it. Now you got it. Your mailbag questions are going to be answered right now 100% correctly or your money back. We've got plenty of them, and glad you guys send them in. You can always do that, by the way, on Twitter or X at SportsDayTV. You can reach me at NFL Stroud, or my email address is rstroud@tampabay.com. But we're happy to do this for you this morning, and let's get started.
We'll start with some Bucs questions, and we got two questions that are kind of similar, so I'll read them both here.
Mm-hmm.
Eric had tweeted, Rick, the Bucs have had consecutive division-winning seasons, albeit with mostly average records in either a first or second round exit. At what point do the Buccaneers front office decide that they need to move on from Todd Bowles to get more out of this roster? Matt had tweeted, said, let's say Todd Bowles does about the same this year and wins about 10 games, gets a wild card berth, loses in the first or second round. Could the Glazers grow impatient like they did with Tony Dungy and look for a different head coach?
Listen, I think the Glazers are always going to want to win championships. I think that's their lone purpose. That's what they want to do. They want to have a team that is consistently in the mix for winning the Super Bowl. And you got to recognize that there's a process, especially coming off the spendthrift years of Tom Brady. They were able to secure a quarterback like Baker Mayfield. I thought that was probably the reason why they've stayed relevant and continue to win division championships. It's been 4 in a row that they have won. And yes, they did have, a first round exit in the wild card last year against Washington. The year prior to that, they were about 4 minutes away from going to the NFC Championship game. Now, every year is different. There are injuries. There's a lot of things. So when you say sort of a zero-sum game, like if Todd Bowles doesn't advance, if they don't win or they don't get further in the playoffs, okay, that's one set of circumstances. But now tell me why they didn't. In other words, did Baker Mayfield get hurt after week 10? Did they lose their top defensive players? Football is a ever evolving, sport that has, you have to overcome injuries and that sort of thing. So no team gets unscathed. So I think there are circumstances where you could say, well, I don't think there's any coach that could have pushed this team further. But if you're telling me that everybody's healthy and that the players develop, and for one reason or another, they get into the postseason and maybe they advance one round or no rounds. It depends on how they play. It depends on is the team still responding to Todd Bowles? Yeah, at some point, if this continues and even though you're making the postseason, it's not going to be enough. It wasn't good enough when Tony Dungy was here, and they made the trade for John Gruden and they won a Super Bowl, right? They didn't like what Dirk Cutter was doing after a winning season and then falling off, and they thought that Jameis Winston still had one more year and somebody could push him over the top, so they fired him and they hired Bruce Arians, and Bruce Arians couldn't get it done with Jameis Winston, so he moved on. They brought in Tom Brady and won a Super Bowl, and then they stuck with Bruce another year, and then eventually Tom Brady was still here, but Bruce wanted to retire, and so they picked Todd Bowles on the staff. Like, this is an evolving business, right? And you have to win. And the more you win, the bigger games you play, and you got to win those too. Everybody's in it for one thing. It's Super Bowl or bust. So I think that Todd has built a lot of equity and trust with the ownership. I think anytime you win 4 straight division titles, which no other coach has done, and I know that Todd was only a part of that the first year, in 2019, of course, it was Bruce Arians' club, but he was their defensive coordinator. But look, they've been in the playoffs 5 years. They've won 4 division titles. He's been a huge part of that. That builds you a lot of equity in his demeanor, his approach to the game. I think the Glazers like working with Todd Bowles. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as well. He made the playoffs, but he can't get him over the hump. And so he's the same reason they fired Tony. It would be the same reason. But I sense at least that They really like what Todd has done. And you also have to understand that, we were talking about coordinators the last few days. When you have to hire a new coordinator every year and change system, that's a big lift. That's a heavy lift for a head coach. And, you could say, well, it's because he's a defensive coach. Maybe they need to, hire an offensive guy and develop quarterbacks or whatever. Anything is possible. Those are discussions they have, after each season. So without having a crystal ball, tell me how they got there. Tell me how they missed the playoffs or how they lost in the wild card round, and then I'll have a better idea of what my answer is. But I don't think there's a movement afoot that says, hey, we got to win a Super Bowl this year, or Todd Bowles, that guy is gone. Having said that, what are their options? Who's available?
That's the bigger issue.
Is Mike Tomlin out there for him? Like, who you want to get, right?
If Todd Bowles wins 10 games again, wins a division title, goes out first or second round.
Right.
They're not making a move on Todd Bowles unless one of two things happens. They meet after the season and they want him to make some changes and he says no. Or they've already got their guy. They're not firing him and then doing an open search hoping they find a guy better. Like, it's going to be, they already know that they're hiring Mike Tomlin or
agree.
Whoever it is, whoever's available.
They're big game hunters and they're overlappers.
Yep.
Right.
They went and got, Kirby Smart from Georgia or whatever. Like, they already know who the answer is. It's not going to be fire them and let's hire a search firm and let's go look at who's available. It's going to be, they already know. If the scenario lies out where they win another division title and just don't succeed in the playoffs, they're not going to fire Todd because and then hope. It's going to be, they already know what's behind door number 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've always done that. And they're going to try to push the envelope. And look, when you talk about firing Tony Dungy, that was an emotional decision for them. They love Tony Dungy, and they still do. And he comes around the organization, and he lives here in Tampa, and he's still very well regarded by everybody. But they felt at that time that they could do something dynamic, and they traded for John Gruden. 2 number ones, 2 number twos, and $8 million. Al Davis wanted Warren Sapp instead of the money, but he took the money instead. Those deals, like that's Super Bowl or bust. When they were flirting with Bill Parcells before hiring Gruden and after firing Dungy, like they really thought they had landed the tuna, and he backed out. He backed out for a number of personal reasons, but they still rallied and they got a big fish in John Gruden. So if they're going to do it, I agree with you. I think they're going to know who they're going to get or who they think they can get. And in their minds, it would have to be a significant upgrade. That's not to say that they don't expect to win a Super Bowl, because they do. With those expectations comes a lot of responsibility. But again, tell me how they got there. Tell me why they didn't win. What was the score of the games? Did they get absolutely everything out of the guys they had left that were able to play? Are they still responding to, Todd Bowles? Those are the important things, and you can't really evaluate them until the season is over and you step back. But I don't think it's a slam dunk. And even though I appreciate that they did do it with Tony, I don't know that they got a Super Bowl or bust sort of, demand on Todd Bowles' future. Although there is every year, there is a discussion about the head coach and the plan going forward. If Glazers don't like it, then they'll find a new head coach. But I don't think it's as simple as saying this is it. No matter what, he either wins the Super Bowl or he's gone. I don't really see how the Glazers operate that way, to be honest.
All right, Matt had tweeted. He says, do you think the Bucs will re-sign Shaq Barrett this year? Came out of retirement last year, seemingly to play with the Bucs. We've bolstered the edge rusher position. Feel like we could add some solid depth, though, with him, and he'd be a nice rotational piece. Your thoughts?
I have not heard any momentum for signing him. What they have said is, like, we love Shaq. He'll be a Buck for life. sort of the platitudes that you get when you're at the end of your career. I know they brought him in last year and such. Um, I think that the signing of Hassan Reddick changes the whole thing, right? Like you have a veteran now who is an elite pass rusher who is at the top of his game, looking for a big contract, and he's hungry. He's only 30 years old. And then on the other side, you're not going to take away reps from Yaya Diaby, you know, and that's what we're talking about. You're going to hire Shaq as a rotational player. You already got Anthony Nelson. Um, you got Chris Braswell, who you're trying to develop. You just don't sign a guy like Shaq, who's not going to play special teams and has to have a helmet every Sunday, just because you like the guy, or you remember his when he had talent, and he was at the peak of his career. A lot of those things aren't true anymore. So you have to take a step back. I love Shaq Barrett. He's one of the strongest human beings I've ever seen. His faith is unwavering. They suffered an unspeakable tragedy with the loss of his daughter, who drowned. But all that being said, even though he was here for a brief time last year, I don't see him as part of this Bucs team.
All right, Scott had tweeted, do you think Vita Vea could get into the Hall of Fame? Doesn't need the sack number from that position. Dominant player at his position with the Super Bowl. Maybe.
I mean, look, his career has not been written just yet. What I would say is it would be difficult right now to say that he's going to in any way, meaningful way. I think he probably would be looking at maybe another championship that would help his candidacy. How much longer can he play? If he had a fairly substantial long career, that would certainly help not only the numbers but his longevity in the game. I think he's in the Hall of Very Good. I don't know that he's a Hall of Fame player yet. This isn't like Mike Evans where you go, oh yeah, first ballot, right? Or Levante David where you go, well, he deserves it. I don't know if he'll get there, but he certainly deserves it. I don't think Vita has done it yet. Even though, and I will always say this, that like he absolutely was a huge part of them getting to the Super Bowl, even in a year where he broke his leg and he missed all those games. He came back for the NFC Championship at Green Bay, did not record a stat, played 33 snaps, and for my money, absolutely won the game because he pushed the pocket so hard into Aaron Rodgers' lap that JPP and Shaq Barrett combined for 5 sacks that day. And there was a couple, I think, interceptions, or at least one I remember. And so, Vita Vea is a force of nature, and I think he's going to do great. As his career goes forward, playing with guys like Kalijah Cansey, who's benefited from playing next to him. So I don't think he's got Hall of Fame numbers yet, and it's not about the sacks because sacks are hard to do at nose tackle. But he's a tremendous player, and maybe if they win a Super Bowl and he's a big part of the defense and whatnot, anything's possible, but right now, I don't think that's the case. Hey, we got more questions for you guys coming up here in just a minute, but first, get on down to Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. You know where that is, just right by the airport. If you go inside the mall, go to the center, second floor, you're going to find a tremendous store with the best Swiss watches available anywhere, not just in Tampa Bay, but anywhere. The Breitling Company's been in business now for over 140 years. They've been in International Plaza for the last 5+ years. Go in there and enjoy yourself. Spend some time. You're going to get a great timepiece. You want to talk to the people there. We'll inform you about the chronomats, the Navatimers, so many great watches to choose from. Have a drink, like spend an hour or so and find out about these great watches. And they'll tell you that as far as the men's watches goes, the NFL is celebrating its 104th year anniversary. Well, they're doing it too. 32 team watches, all the colors in these chronomat watches with the face is got the team colors. You got the logo there. They're beautiful. Go to TampaBay.com. You'll see the Bucs team watch. Now, this is only as supplies last, right, for all 32 teams. So get there quickly. And then how about a watch for your wife or your girlfriend, a sports watch, something that's beautiful and durable, and all kinds of different colored wristbands for her to choose from. She is going to love it. It is Breitling Boutique. It's at International Plaza Mall. And when you get there, please let them know that you heard about this right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay.
All right, Rick, we got several NFL Bucs schedule questions, so we'll start with Joe. He says, I'm starting to think the primetime games are more of a reflection of what the league thinks of teams over bye week placement. Packers, Falcons have week 5 byes, while the Browns and Jets have the same bye week as the Eagles and Bucs during week 9.
Yeah, I think the biggest determiner of who the NFL really likes is the bye week. We talk about competitive balance, we talk about scheduling, and certainly if you're a team that has won its division, you might get a first place schedule. Those matchups are attractive to TV networks. That's what gets you on TV 3, 4, 5 times. But I think more than that, because it's an honor, obviously, to be the only game that's playing at the time, whether it's Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, holiday, that sort of thing. But more than that, I really think it's about the bye week, because if I give a team a bye week in week 4 or 5, right, what am I saying? I'm saying that this team has to go, the next 12 weeks or 11 weeks without any time off, without any weeks off. And we know there's going to be injuries, and we know there's going to be, mental fatigue and things like that. You can't tell me it doesn't benefit a team to have a bye week at or near the middle of the season, as opposed to, and the Bucs were there, 2 years ago when they had a bye week after a 3-1 start. I think they lost all their momentum, and then they went on a tailspin, lost I think 5 of their next 6. That matters, and only the league can decide who's getting the bye week and when. So if you see teams that you expect to go to the Super Bowl, and I haven't looked at any schedules, but I'll bet you that, I don't know, maybe the Kansas City Chiefs don't have a bye week in the first 4 games, or maybe the Buffalo Bills don't either. I haven't even looked at that to see, but I bet you that's the case. And I think the Bucs having the bye week where they do towards the middle of the season is an advantage. And I think it's an acknowledgement by the NFL that we would like to see them have every chance to make the postseason. And we're going to try to get them, in a position where if they have injuries, they can overcome them, that sort of thing. So bye weeks are important. And I do think it's a tell by the NFL that they believe these teams are strong and maybe more deserving of a break, because they want to see those teams go deep into the postseason.
I think the primetime games are an indication of who the networks like.
That is correct. Absolutely.
And
that rings the cash register.
Who brings the ratings, which is ultimately what brings the money to the NFL. So they
typically, the better the team, the better the ratings, right?
Yeah, that's why, this year the Chiefs are, of course, in a lot of prime. I think I saw a note where the Lions, 12 of their 17 games are national television, either, the 425 doubleheader game or prime time, or, obviously their Thanksgiving Day as well. But because they're such a good team, that's, they're up there now. So, all right, Garrett had tweeted. He says, I have a mailbag question about the Bucs schedule. Is there a reason the NFL schedules division games with the same opponent so close to each other? Playing the Panthers twice in 3 weeks seems like an odd choice, and I don't believe it's the first time this has happened in recent memory. The league should consider spreading out common opponents on the schedule if at all possible.
Well, they have played Carolina, it seems, in a short space. Here's the thing. So it used to be, back in the day, teams would clinch their division fairly early, and they would go ahead and rest players towards the end of the season. And the NFL didn't like that, because for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's not fair to the fans. And frankly, some teams could get a little rusty by doing that. So what they did was, because they didn't want teams tanking, they didn't want teams taking weeks off at the end. So they backloaded every schedule with division games. It doesn't matter what division you're in. You're going to have, maybe 3 games in 4 weeks, or 4 games in 6 weeks. They're going to be in your division to end the season. And that's because they want teams to, have things undecided until the very end. And then that way the top players play and everybody's happy. So I don't see that changing. It's a little bit of an anomaly. I mean, if you play in a division that only has 3 other teams, right, and you're going to play a bunch of these division games in a compressed time, 3-4 weeks, it's inevitable one of those teams is going to play you twice in 3 weeks or twice in 4 weeks, because you got to play each one 2 times, including once at home. So I don't make much into that.
Baseball does the same thing, and I don't understand it. Like the Rays will play, let's say, the Royals. You have a home and a road series. You'll play it like the next week, and you don't play each other the rest of the season. It's like, why? The whole point of, if you're going to play a team multiple times, it should be spread out somewhat. And I agree with Garrett. Like, I don't understand why the Panthers and Bucs have to play twice in 3 weeks. I know the Ravens and Bengals are doing the same thing, and I think there's 2 other sets of division foes this year playing twice in 3 weeks, and it's just it makes 0 sense. Like, part of when you play multiple times is you spread out because you never know who the injuries and those kind of things are. So by spacing it out,
if you want to backload these schedules with conference teams, there's only 3 other teams in the division.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you got to play. If I'm going to play Atlanta, New Orleans, or Carolina, and that's 3 teams, right? And I want to schedule division games in 4 of those weeks. Well, I've got to play somebody twice, right?
Well,
maybe not twice in 3 weeks.
In 4 weeks would be different.
Yeah, maybe not twice in 3 weeks. I get that. So I guess the answer is I really don't have a clue, and I'm sure they would prefer not to. But it goes back to the fact that they want every team to have a chance to win the playoffs and they want that way teams will play their stars and they won't sit people and make a mockery of the whole situation. So that's why they're doing it.
All right, Tommy had tweeted, says there are 2 scheduling conflicts, August 23rd and September 21st for the Bucs and Rays. Will Major League Baseball move both Rays games to a different time to help ease the traffic nightmare on Dale Mabry?
I mean, it's totally up to Major League Baseball. I can tell you that the NFL doesn't give one rat's rump.
As we've said all along, despite what other people told you that they would consider.
They do not care. And really, I should know this because proof of it was last year when we went to Detroit early in the season.
Yep.
And I, got an Uber there and was running kind of late. And of course, they didn't open the gates of Ford Field till, a little bit later than I thought they would. There was a crowd unlike any I've ever seen trying to get into that stadium. And one of the things that complicated it, now this is the second game, I believe, of the season, the Tigers were playing at that very time, at that very venue, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so Major League Baseball didn't care. Like, it was the worst time in the world to have a game because there's all these people down there. And now you had like another 20, 30,000 that are all in the, like, legitimately in the same area. You couldn't even figure out what row you were in trying to get through a gate. So they don't care. And I don't make anything of it. The Rays only hold 10,000 or so, and they share.
But they're sharing parking lots, which is the issue.
But for 10,000 fans, right? Like, how much parking are we talking about? I think there's room because we park when I do baseball. When I say we, when I cover baseball, and cover the Rays, it's just a little corner there on on Dale Mabry and what is the road that goes across to One Buck? MLK.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the corner, right in that corner, and there might be, I don't know, 25 cars, 30. Now there's cars, parked other place. Like, that's sort of the media area. But it's not like you don't look at it and go, wow, there must be a Rays game today. Like, it's with other traffic, it'd be imperceptible. Conflict, will it cause a problem? I guess anything can. It'd be ideal if they had a garage or something, but they don't, So,
well, there's a couple things, and the other part is look, there's a lot of staff that works at both places, and so there's some issues there too, from security and everything else. But I think you'll see that this is my guess, but the preseason game on the August 23rd or whatever that date is, they could move the baseball game up to the afternoon. 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever they want.
Yeah,
to
I
do.
think that's what they'll do.
It's scheduled for a 7 o'clock game now, basically to stay out of the heat and the
Yeah.
storms or whatever else. But
Yeah.
in August, but they could move that up to a noon or 1 o'clock game if they choose. The game on the September 21st, the home opener. I don't see them. They could move it to Sunday night if baseball will let them have an exception and play opposite whatever games on Sunday Night Baseball, unless ESPN wanted to put the Rays and Red Sox on there.
Right.
Which, although looking at the records now, you wouldn't. That's probably not their choice. Or both the Rays and the Red Sox have the next day off on that Monday. They could put the game on Monday.
Yep.
Boston's in the middle of a road trip. They would just take the off day Sunday in Tampa instead and play Monday, then go to Toronto. The Rays head on the road, but they wouldn't head out till Monday. So you could move that game to Monday if you didn't want to move it to Sunday night, or if baseball doesn't let them move it, it's just later Sunday.
Right.
It's now scheduled for a noon start. The Bucs game is at a 1.
Mm-hmm.
So there's options for baseball if they choose to do that, or the Rays.
It'll be up to baseball because, again, the football doesn't care.
No, the Bucs are playing at 1 o'clock that Sunday. That's
come hell or high water.
That's done. That they're not moving that. So
nope.
The Rays have already moved things like in a couple Fridays. I believe it's June 6th. The Rays are playing a day game on a Friday, the first game of a series, because Metallica plays at Raymond James that night.
Right.
And then that Sunday, Metallica plays again, but the Rays already have a noon start. Metallica will be that evening. So,
yeah.
The Rays have made accommodations for some things like that, and I'm guessing they will. Mark Hopkins said they're looking at it and exploring it. That would be my guess. All right, Sean in Georgia emailed us. Says, I love the interview you had last week with Simeon Rice. However, one thing really stood out to me. At one point, he admitted to playing for the name on the back of his jersey over the name on the front. This mindset typically never sits well with me, but the way he stated it really resonated. It didn't come across selfish or arrogant. Instead, it felt like he was stating that if he made his family proud, specifically his dad, and left a legacy as a player, then the team and franchise would benefit as well. It was quite a unique way to frame that mindset. Did you catch that? If so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally caught it, and I agree with you. I don't think it was a slight or a selfish thing. I actually think it was the opposite. If you put in the context of that whole event, the election to the Ring of Honor, and he had a surprising emotional reaction because he watched the video highlight, and his 2-year-old son was there, and it's the first time his son watched him play football on video. I guess there's not much memorabilia or anything like that in his house. So while he watched his son watching him, he thought of his parents, who he lost in 2015 and 2016. Both passed away. And he became incredibly emotional, and we were discussing family. We were discussing his parents. And he goes, I'm the result of a dream that my parents had. And, I love this game of football. And, I played it to make them proud, right? Like that was his why. Every guy in the NFL has a why. Some of it's money, some of it's fame, it can be anything. For him, it was the Rice name. He wanted people to remember their names. And that doesn't mean that was at the expense or a sacrifice of the team. Quite the contrary. The greater the player he was, the more honor he brought to his family, and the more recognition his name got. And so he wanted to dominate both for his team, but I think most important to him was he represented his mom and dad who made this happen. This is a guy from, south side of Chicago, was already a superstar when he got there, went to Illinois, third overall pick, defensive rookie of the year. He had done so much. But yeah, I think it was not because he wasn't proud to be a Buccaneer. I think it was just that he knew that the best way to honor them was to be exceptional on the football field, and that's what he was. And so to him, it meant more that his mom and dad were proud of him than anything he accomplished with the team. That's not to say he didn't enjoy what they did, because he absolutely did. And if you talk to people, they'll tell you he was the reason. He was that missing piece that they didn't have on that great defense. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I don't think it's a slight or a selfish act. I just think that, he was being very honest there.
All right, quick lightning question here. Michael had tweeted, what should the trade return look for Isaac Howard? And for those fans who don't know, Isaac Howard is the number 1 draft pick by the Lightning a couple seasons ago. He's at Michigan State, chose to stay there this season. He basically said he's not going to sign with the Lightning. Julian Breezeball essentially said the same thing. If he does not sign, he's returning to Michigan State next year for a senior year. By August 15th of 2026, he becomes a free agent and can sign anywhere. So as far as trade value goes, if he does not sign with the Lightning by August 15th, 2026, the Lightning receive a second-round draft pick the next draft.
Okay.
So any draft compensation, if they wanted to trade Isaac Howard this year, you're probably looking around like a second-round pick, or maybe it's part of a bigger package. Maybe he's packaged with another player to bring someone else back, et cetera. It gives Julian Breezeball some options at this year's draft, or he can hold on to him and even trade him next year prior to the draft, because the draft is in late June, so it'd be before he becomes a free agent next season as well. So, don't look for a huge return back. He was the number 1 draft pick. He'll get us end of the second round compensation for him if he does not sign him in the 2027 draft. So, if anything, you're probably looking at he's probably part of a bigger package. Maybe you're trading some prospects or other players to bring back someone bigger if you want to shake up the roster a little bit, and he's part of that package. So. All right, we'll end on this one today. Jonathan emailed, I enjoy your podcast very much and listen to every one. In today's Tampa Bay Times, there are many recollections about 490 First Avenue South building. However, I didn't read any from the sports department. Rick, do you have 1 or 2 stories you could share about the building?
Wow, about the building. I think I've been there long enough that they've actually upgraded that building since I was first hired. But it's kind of sad. It was actually very sad in a way. Of course, the hurricane changed a lot of people's lives, not the least of which our business, but the business in general. We have been downsizing for quite a while, and so what I remember about the building is really the people in it, and just how different it was then. Whether we could have or not, we didn't work remotely. Maybe it was the time of the times of the year, and back in those days, a lot of people went to the office every day, even though we were still gotten out on the field, and I covered the Bucs, and I was in Tampa a lot. In the off season, especially, I was expected to go to St. Petersburg, and when I did, I would go to work with about 30 other people, like 30, and some of those would be clerks that came in at 4:00 or agate people or whatnot. And it got to the point where we were so crowded on the 3rd floor there that they asked me if I could leave my desk and give it to somebody else who was coming on at 5:00 to do, either some layout work or be clerking for us, answer phones, take dictation, whatever. We were that crowded, and we had a big space on the 3rd floor, and the camaraderie you had, with other writers and columnists. And I'm talking about guys like the late Hubert Mizell, right, and Gary Shelton, who worked there, and of course my good friend Tom Jones and Don Banks, may rest in peace, and so many great people and talents that came through that building. That's what you remember. It's not the physical structure per se, but we had an unbelievable amount of talented people that went on and did other things too. Don Banks went to Sports Illustrated, and it's just Bob Herrig, who covered golf for ESPN and Sports Illustrated. Like, there's so much talent was through there, and there was so much camaraderie, and you discussed sports and you argued, and it was sort of like Wilbon and Kornheiser and PTI. Like, it was that sort of atmosphere. But there were so many of us, and there was an esprit de corps, that you kind of felt that together. I would, when I was asked to come down there, in particular in the summertime when the Bucs weren't playing, I didn't have a ton to do early on in the day, but I would get there by 10 a.m. and I'd hang out for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and by noon, I'd spend my lunch hour playing basketball at a YMCA that was still there, no longer the YMCA, but was adjacent to the Times building. We'd have the most hellacious runs during the day, uh, probably for way too long or longer than the 1 hour lunch period. We'd run for about an hour and a half, and then I'd come back, I'd shower, come back, and I'd end up staying there till about 6 o'clock. And then finally, when all the teams were done with their business, they would call me back, and I would get a story, and I might be there till 10 or 11 o'clock, and my editor would come in the next day and go, "How long were you here? When did this happen?" I go, "Oh, about the time everybody else walked out the door, as it does every day in the off season." But it was really just a great time for journalism. Tremendous, successful people. Michelle Kaufman from the Miami Herald, like all these people went on and did terrific things, and I benefited from being around so many of them. That it's just that it's the people, it's that scene, and unfortunately, it turned into sort of a George Clooney movie where there's empty cubicles and dangling wires and things, and that was hard to watch. We were it was a transitional time, and we got smaller, and I think we're down to, I don't know, in sports maybe 5 writers, including John Romano, who's a columnist. Like that's not even a fifth of the number of people that we had when we started. But that's a sign of the times. I get it, and they're willing to roll with it. But things would happen too. Like I got on an elevator one time, and it was like there's Gale Sayers. Like, what's he doing on our elevator in St. Petersburg? It's like, hey, Mr. Sayers. And I was a big, back in the day, Brian Song and all that, right? He was the AD at Kansas at the time. And I don't know why he came there, but it was to talk to somebody on an editorial board about something. And yeah, there was Gale Sayers. Like you'd see people come through there. And of course, a lot of celebrations for Pulitzer Prizes that were won while I worked there. I didn't win one, but they were really monumental and just incredible accomplishments. So, just the people, the photographers, like, we spent so much time together on the road, all of that. But the physical building, I don't think I can drive by there and not think of those times. And it was the Times building, and then we sold it, and then we leased back a floor. And like I said, it was just, slowly things were pulled away. And then, of course, this last hurricane collapsed the crane on it and all that. So we're not back there. But yeah, all those names I just mentioned, the Bruce Lowitz, the, you know, Tom Zuko's, the Tom Jones, Gary Shelton, Hubert Mizell, and we covered everything. Bob Herrig, that Don Banks. That's what I remember. Hey, enjoy those mailbag questions. You can always send them to us on Twitter or X at SportsDayTV. You can reach me on Twitter at NFL Stroud. My email address is rstroud@tampabay.com. Make sure you get down to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Check out the men's and women's watches. They got the NFL edition 32-team watches while supplies last. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Let them know that you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. For Steve Versnick, I am Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.